Hey guys, today there won't be a live QA, but we are going to do a QA. This is a QA that's basically you guys had sent questions to askknowyourgear@gmail.com, and I'm going to go ahead and answer those. And there's a lot in here. There's hundreds. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to randomly pick some, and we'll read them and we'll answer them and have some fun. So let's do the first one. This one's from Mill. Mill is saying, hey, I'm planning on buying a solid state amp to do small gigs. I have a loud drummer. You think a Blackstar ID60 would be loud enough? How do you think it compares to the ID Core 150 or Katana amp? Okay, good question. So I have a lot of experience with the ID60 amp. I had the head, and I also had the 30 and the 15. And the interesting thing about the ID amps, not the ID Core, we're just talking about the ID series, okay? ID Core came after that. The ID series has a marketing hiccup, and here's the hiccup. See, it says it's a 60, but it's really like 100 and something watts. It's what they're saying is that an ID60 amp, even though it's solid state, is the equivalent of a 60 watt tube amp. So the ID30 is not 30 watts, it's the equivalent of a 30 watt tube amp. In other words, the solid state has a different, maybe 80 watts or 100 watts of power, but they say, hey, look, this solid state amp will match to that type of tube amp. So obviously, a solid state amp that is matched to an amp that's putting out tube amp, putting out 60 watts, is going to be plenty loud, even for a loud drummer. So it's a pretty loud head. Now, comparatively, the ID Core 50, I personally feel like the ID60 is better than the ID Core 50, but you may have to try them both. The Katana, the 100 watt head Katana, is very nice, but again, if it was me, I'd prefer the ID60. I kind of feel like it was a louder. It has, I love the tube options, the idea you can vary which tubes you're using for simulation. It's a really good amp, and you can pick them up used for a really good deal, and that's something to think about too. But I have very little experience with the ID Core 150. I've tried them, but I can't say I've in-depthly tried them. The Katanas are really good. Like I said, at the 100 watt Katana, that would be my second choice of those three. All right, the next one is going to be Brent. Now, Brent Horrocks says, hi, Phil, I'm a huge fan. Thank you, Brent, I appreciate that. Thanks for making all of your knowledge about gear accessible online. Oh, thank you again. So here's the question. It says, I have read a bunch of online forums about the type of metal used in bridges and stop bars. Oh, and stop bars. Okay, so in other words, hardtail bridges and tremolos. Okay. Most of them extol the virtues of using aluminum or steel versus mix of pot metal. Most bridges and stop bars are made of. In other words, I get what he's saying. He's saying, hey, look, a lot of the bridges are made of Chinese pot metal, and somebody's saying that the aluminum and or brass and or steel are better choices. He then goes on and says, in addition, I noticed this year that Gibson has started to ship some of their Les Pauls with aluminum, or if you're in Europe, aluminium, and titanium stop bars. I hadn't seen the titanium stuff. That's interesting. And it says, as standard. In your opinion, does this really matter? Or is it marketing gimmick? Well, it's not a marketing gimmick, and here's why it's not a marketing gimmick. If they're charging you the same or more for a solid brass or solid aluminum piece of metal versus pot metal or cast metal, it does cost more, because what they're really doing is they're saying, look, they're taking a piece of aluminum, brass, or steel, and they're machining it out of one piece. And when you're talking about tolerances and strengths, it's going to be stronger than something that was molded, right, where it was poured and molten into a cast. Now, so why I say it's not a gimmick is, if they're trying to tell you that that's a better quality or more expensive, it is more expensive. So they're not really giving you something equal or lesser value and then trying to upcharge you. Now, as far as does it matter? That's hard to tell. Paul Reed Smith uses aluminum and brass. He really believes that it makes a difference in the guitar's tone. There's a lot of things I've noticed over the years that I can't tell you that I notice. You know what I notice for me is that the softer metals, especially the pot metal stuff, whenever you're talking about tolerances of intonation, those metals can get corrupted really fast. In other words, they can bend, chip, dig in. They can cause problems. So a harder piece of metal is better. The logic being, if it touches the string, it's probably important. So I don't think it's a gimmick. I think it's good. Would I pay top dollar for that stuff? Maybe not. But if it's a couple bucks more, I would go ahead and get something better. The next question comes from Jasmine. Jasmine wants to know, what do you think of the Orville or the Greco Les Paul? They are about $1,500 Canada dollars compared to $3,500 for a Les Paul standard. Do you repair some? Question mark. Are they stable and gig ready? So the trick with that is this, is that they are good quality guitars. We know that, right? Greco guitars are collectible. Orville guitars are collectible. They're, you know, right? They're the 70s era lawsuit style guitars. Over the years, I've worked on many, and really, it's the quality of the guitar is fine. I mean, obviously, they're older and they're used, and I've, you know, had everything from have to refret them to crown and level the frets, you know, right? Electronics issues because the electronics got a little old. So I've had issues with them as a repair person, but only because of the age and the use. They've been used, not because there was a lack of quality in componentry. I mean, it lasted as long as it was probably supposed to. My only thing is at $1,500 Canadian dollars, seems high for those kind of guitars. I really personally think if you're going to look at those, unless you have a reason to want one of those older Japanese guitars, definitely look at the new, you know, maybe some of the new Epiphones, some of the new PRS-SEs, some of the new LTD Eclipses. There's a lot of options in the single cut realm that are really nice. However, if you really feel bonded to those, or you want to get like a kind of a cool Japanese style-esque guitar that's got that lawsuit vibe, it looks like a Les Paul, yeah, I have no problems with quality. So like I said, I would definitely check them out. And it's going to be the only thing you're going to be looking for issues, of course, is, you know, how abused are they? So try to find someone who's has some experience with it. In other words, they've had the guitar for a while and maybe they've taken care of it. Timothy Moan says, Tim says, hi, Phil. And I'm going to get right to the question. He said he took some time away from guitar and he came back. That's great. So we want to get back to the question. It says, I saw your video on cheap guitars and your comments on the cheaper metals used in products coming out of China. I recently purchased a GFS 59 professional single coils. So that's Guitar Fetish. For you guys that don't know what GFS is, Guitar Fetish is a company online. You can buy inexpensive style parts, everything from bridges to, you know, to pickups to you know, nuts and tuning keys. They seem to be made of quality materials. I would like to see you do a review on a quality GFS pickups. Now, what I can tell you, Tim, is I've installed many GFS parts over the years in many guitars, and I've found no issues. There's some kind of knockoff, or they're copies or clones of other types of pickups and parts. And for the most part, they're as on par as quality parts you'd find on guitars in moderate price ranges. So they're good stuff. And that's really what I get the vibe is. If you buy a guitar for $500, $600, the parts that probably come on that guitar, these are probably comparable or those same parts. So no issues. Some people tend to not like them. Some people praise them. I'm indifferent to them because, like, again, I haven't found any quality issues with them. And sound-wise, they seem to sound fine. Very rarely have I installed them over the years to find the person tell me later they just didn't like the way they sound and take them back out. So yeah, so quality materials, they're probably no less quality materials than anything you can buy hanging on a wall in your local music store, and those price ranges I spoke about. Let's see, the next one is, let's go to, okay. Okay. Sebastian says, hey, I found a used Boss CE2 chorus pedal at a pawn shop. They are asking $125. It's really beat up, but the problem is there is no label underneath the pedal to determine if it's vintage model in Japan. One of my questions is, does this decrease the value? Okay, Sebastian, a couple things. First of all, I'm going to disclose this. In the CE2 Boss pedal, I have owned all of the labels, the pink label, the blue label, the black label. So that's the Japan, the Taiwan, the original. So the original analog Japan, I've owned the original analog Taiwan, I've owned the new one, right, and the other one, and then the new one. So I've had all four, and at one time to actually A/B them. And so what I can tell you is this: I thought the older ones warmed up the sound, but there was a clarity to the new ones that I liked. I found that I really didn't care enough to really just get that old one. But what I can tell you is, yes, the label missing does devalue the piece a little bit, because that's going to justify the pricing of it being a vintage Japanese era Boss pedal. The other thing that you need to do, if you want to verify what it is, you just need to open up the bottom and look inside. You'll be able to tell when you look at the componentry and the types and the colors of the boards and everything you're using to know if it's actually the Japanese one or the newer models. Now, sometimes it gets a little tricky because a lot of those pedals went in stages. In other words, they made them this way in Japan, then they made them the exact way pretty much in Taiwan, then they changed them, and they currently still make them in Taiwan. So, it's me personally as a guitar player and a guitar collector, if I was questioning it for $125, I haven't looked on the market. I don't know if that's a good deal or not, but I would say I would pass. If it already feels sketchy, keep walking. The next one is, let's see. Next one is for, Duran. Duran wants to know, can you do a video specifically on pedals with an acoustic electric, like a full pedal board? What works well, what doesn't, what are some good ones to start with, etc. Thank you. Okay, so you're talking about electric acoustic, in other words, acoustic guitar with electronics, and you want to look at some pedals. You know, pedals, I will tell you over and over again, you want to look at, if you're new to pedals, don't just start buying pedals. I know watching videos is a great way to get an idea, and don't build a pedal board. For acoustic players, there's only a few pedals you really are going to find you need. And to every acoustic player, those pedals will be a little different. But one of the things you can do that's really good, you need is good preamp. If your acoustic guitar has a really nice preamp in it, maybe you can get away with that. But my guess is you still need an outboard preamp pedal or an acoustic amp, something that you control the sound before it gets the mixing control of the person who's controlling the sound of the band or whoever the performer is. Now, that all being said, what I would look at is, one of the cool ways to get into acoustic to check things out is some of the Zoom pedals. Zoom makes these pedals. They're like, and you can get used, seriously, $15, $20 on eBay and Reverb. And they're not great, but they're super cheap, and they have all the kind of acoustic pedals. There's like the 505A or something like that. It's acoustic. You just type in Zoom and acoustic and it'll come up. Anyways, something like that, I would check into that. And yes, I can work on some videos like that. I did a one for 2 pedals that I think acoustic players have. That was the Echoplex. I really think acoustic pushing the signal over is a really cool thing to have. And of course, a compressor and is nice, and a looper is really good as well. And the last, we'll do 2 more. Bill says, Phil, being an amateur hobbyist guitar player, I don't have the money and time to figure out and build a pedal board. Gotcha. Demos and articles I've seen that I read indicate that MultiFX processors may be the most cost-effective and economical way to go. Can you point me to some previous review articles that you've done on them, and could you do one for those of us that are thinking about MultiFX units? Okay. Really like your YouTube channel. Okay, and he's just thank you for the kind words after that, Bill. So let's get to it. So MultiFX processors. Yes. 2 things you need to learn about MultiFX processors. One, there's 2 kinds of them. There are ones that will model pedals primarily. Let's say like the Boss ME50, ME70, ME80. Line 6 M13, M5, M9, those model mostly pedals. Although they might have some preamping, that's a good way to check out some cool pedals. Some processors, by those same brands even, or other brands, model amps and stuff, and that's where it gets a little confusing. If you're trying to get into pedals, one of the highest things I recommend is buying one of those Boss ME50s, ME70s, ME80s, the M5, M9, or M13 pedals, and getting a taste of pedals. Now, one thing I like about the M series by Line 6 is you can not only try all the pedals, you can move them around virtually with knobs, and stuff, right? And both these are knob interfaces, so it's something that it's very intuitive for someone who's going to be tweaking with pedals instead of going into screens. So those are definitely cool ways to go. Some of my concerns with MultiFX units is the idea that it's going to be like a pedal is really confusing because it doesn't work like a pedal. It has screens and sometimes you have to plug them into a computer. Me personally, if you're that much of a novice or if you're new and you're really getting into pedals, I would prefer you know, if it was me, I would prefer looking at some of the modeling amps that plug in your computer and let you virtually see some of the pedals. Those platforms are designed to be very user-friendly because it's in mind for someone who's just getting into this as a hobby or as an activity. And so the Mustang series by Fender, fantastic. PV Viper series is good. The new Boss Katana amps, again, a great way. And I would imagine you much more easier to use those than some of these processors. So go that way. Plus, price-wise, I hate to say it, you know, the Katana amp at $199 or the Mustang 3 at $299, they're on par with those processors. Something to think about for sure. One thing about the Mustang 3 is it comes with a foot switch, which is nice, and it's very easy to use. The last one we'll do, and again, these are all just random, is, let's see. I'm taking a little bit, sorry about that. Okay. Okay. Greg, here's one from Greg. Greg says, hey, my name is Greg. Hi, Greg. He's from Orlando, which I assume is Florida here in the States. He says, he's sending the email. It's a pretty long one, so I've scanned it over. He's talking about left-handed guitars. He's a left-handed player. If you good left-handed players out there, you probably already know where he's going with this. There's no lefty love out there for you guys. And he's saying that basically that's his problem. Where should he go for left-handed? And there's some left-handed guitars. He said that sometimes they're extremely high-end guitars, have lefties, but they become very expensive, and like the Wolfgangs. Now, he says he has an Ibanez RG and a Schecter EC1000 and a few others, by the way. So the question is, where do you get left-handed guitars? Two things I recommend right off the bat. There's Southpaw Guitars in Texas. They are probably the largest left-handed dealer. I'm not lefty, but I'm aware of it. I would check them out. If you are a left-handed player out there, please put your recommendations for other cool stores that have huge selection of left-handed guitars. That is a place that I know they're notoriously known for buying out as many left-handed guitars from manufacturers as possible. Now, if you're looking for a manufacturer, you already mentioned you have an Ibanez and a Schecter. I personally think Schecter is the most left-handed friendly guitar company out there, with almost all their models being available left-handed, and they actually will put colors besides just black and left-handed guitars. So they will show you some lefty love. So there you go. Those are my two recommendations if you're a left-handed player. He also mentioned if I checked out the Gemini pedal, the distortion. I have checked it out. I think I owned it many years ago, and I thought it was really cool. I just didn't use it, so I got rid of it. You're right, it is a cool pedal for sure. And they were keeping reasonable price, but I think they've been bumping up lately. So very cool questions. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, next week we'll be live again, but this week we are recorded. Thank you again so much, guys, for sending the questions. If you have a question, you can also send it in to askknowyourgear@gmail.com, and I'll try and either respond to them or do them on the live videos as well. Another thing I want to mention is if you're also in a band or you own a company like pedals or guitars or whatever, and you have shirts, and if you like, you can contact me on that same email address. And if you're interested in sending me a shirt to see if I'll wear it on the show, I will do that for sure. And I'll trade you. So all you have to do is contact me and send me the shirt, and I will send you one of my shirts. We'll trade. It's a horse trade for shirts, right? And I'll wear your shirt. So if you have a band or something you want to promote that's gear-wise, I'm always curious too. So we can maybe trade some shirts. As always, guys, thank you for your time, and know your gear.